Full stop, this isn't the review I wanted to put out next. What I was planning on was Tyranny, but I was about halfway through when I decided to start setting up for that review, and literally all of my footage is like this. I don't know why, but yeah, I can't use any of this, so have this quickie while I work on something else. Elderborn is, as described by its developers, quote, a metal AF slasher with brutal FPP melee combat and Souls-like / RPG character progression, unquote. It released in January of last year by Hyperstrange, and now if you're familiar with games that likely contribute toward the video games cause shootings and games are ruining today's society arguments that crop up every so often from various government officials, that name might ring a bell. Hyperstrange, alongside Creative Forge Games and Running with Scissors, is working on the yet-to-be-released Postal Brain Damaged. They also published an interesting turn-based game with Doom motifs called Jupiter Hell, which was developed by Chaos Forge Games. Maybe I'll review those in the future, but for now, I digress. The game opens with you choosing between one of two characters, wherein the only difference is the character model and the voice. It doesn't actually change anything mechanically, and follows with a stylized cutscene and an expository voiceover. After beating others in an arena, the Elders have chosen you, and only you, to venture into the age-old city of Yormu on their behalf. The initial area you enter into acts as shockingly a tutorial. Importantly, it introduces you to one of the Souls-like mechanics within the game. The Fountain, which has a look that changes depending on which chapter you're in, acts similarly to the bonfires of Dark Souls. Here you can rest, heal, refill on your healing vials, respond to dead enemies, and level up using the second mechanic, Essence, which act like souls. Both you and enemies drop them upon death, and you can spend them to level up. Some things to note about those features. Firstly, unlike in Dark Souls, where you have to rest to activate the bonfire effectively as a checkpoint, a fountain just needs to be activated. You don't need to respawn your enemies to set it up as a checkpoint. Secondly, you have to pick up your lost essence, whereas most other essence, other than what's found in something like a chest, gets picked up automatically if you're close enough. The combat is fairly nice, though arguably slower paced depending on how you play these kinds of games. Your first introduction to enemies often results in you sizing them up, singling them out from their allies so you can learn their attack patterns and figure out the best means to deal with them. Here you can see my first thought was boot. When that failed, it became Big Hammer, but by the end I landed on Big Boot plus Quick Spam, a strategy that has never once steered me wrong. Feels like there's less importance on speed for the most part and more on timing and single target focusing. Arguably is the operative term here, however. Getting that aforementioned speed and murdering many enemies at once can be immensely satisfying if dealt with properly, though getting overwhelmed is a very tangible threat as a result. When you encounter this scenario, it's important to remember, as I almost forgot here, that kicking is always an option, and a fun option at that. Kicking can break the guard of shielded enemies, and when used in conjunction with something like the guitars, can be brutally efficient when it comes to those same enemies, or most of the enemies in the game, really. And you can kick people off of ledges and into the dark abyss below. Their essence is dropped where they were standing previously as opposed to wherever they eventually land, which is nice. Less nice, though, is sometimes it simply just doesn't work. I don't know if it's like a hitbox thing or an animation thing, but either way, it's annoying. This game also comes with a full suite of weapons, of which there are two varieties, ones that can block and ones that can parry. The first defends against all damage from the front while the right mouse button is held down, but not all attacks can be blocked, and depending on the specific weapon, can take up a majority or even all of your screen. The second allows counterattacking but has a tight window of opportunity when you press that same button, and similar to blocking, not all attacks can be parried, and the size of your window of opportunity to do so can vary based on the weapon in your hand. The sickles, if you're curious, are my second favorite weapon in the game, as well as my second favorite pair of sickles in gaming. These weapons can be upgraded through using them, and their appearance can change when they've been upgraded. In addition, each weapon and ability has a mastery challenge which, when beaten, rewards you with essence. It doesn't automatically give you that essence upon completion, though. It has to be claimed through your menu. The combat is supplemented by a few mechanics, outside of what weapons you use. I already mentioned kicking, but there's also the dash, which doesn't seem to have a cooldown, so feel free to spam it out of any risky situation, and a few abilities you gain through leveling up. One is what I earlier called a Big Boot, holding the kick key to charge up a, charging attack that deals a good amount of damage and knocks down whatever's in your way. Another ability is called Rip and Tear, for good reason. You remove the head of a fallen foe so you can use it as a projectile against other enemies. Nothing quite shows that you mean business like pelting your enemies with the decapitated heads of their best friend. There's also a similar mechanic to Bloodborne in the previously reviewed on this channel Necromunda Hired Gun. The yellow in your health bar to the top left is how much damage you just took. If you attack and more specifically hit while that yellow is there, you're able to heal some damage taken. This rewards aggression, as does the fact that your healing vials, like the flasks in Path of Exile, also previously reviewed, refill as you kill enemies. Another thing to consider is that the enemies do love infighting, likely some kind of environmental storytelling, and allowing them to be easy pickings for you in the aftermath. Infighting enemies are also likely to ignore you even if you attack, as long as they're still infighting. Now, not every location is going to have that, though enemies can still accidentally hit and thus hurt each other. The environments are great. At first it felt a bit bland, but over time the environments became more interesting and open up over time, a contrast to the initial linearity of the level. Entering the city was a great moment. There are these burned bodies lining where you walk, barricades put up everywhere, and this strange shape in the sky suggesting that the 3 towers you must travel to are more than just decorative. The sounds in general are also great, especially the soundtrack, which is made up of almost entirely metal and can also be nabbed for about $4 when it's not on sale. The game isn't entirely without issues. None of them are really deal breakers, but are worth bringing up. There's that kicking thing I mentioned earlier, as well as this weird darkness effect, which, while strange, wasn't actually detrimental and thankfully was only in this one spot. Sometimes the reticle needs to be slightly off to pick some items up. This is especially noticeable with those batteries in the second area. I find that blood, you're hurt signifier at the edge of the screen really annoying. It seems to stick around even if I'm not actually at low health. Looks like it appears at about the halfway mark. And to the best of my knowledge, it should be something you're able to turn off in the options, but it's a default setting, so why? Another annoying thing is the first boss fight. It feels somewhat janky, and it isn't because of this hilarious I'm blocking pose. I found myself stuck in him quite a bit, and it's hard to see the attacks and time parrying when I'm inside the guy. Elderborn is a fun, though short, game. My first playthrough took a little under 5 hours, with its 27 achievements and New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus mode. There's a large emphasis on replayability, and its gameplay is enjoyable once you get the hang of it. I can recommend it rather easily, especially to those looking for a first-person game with less shotguns and more greatswords. Again, this isn't what I was going to review at first, but here it is regardless. I got more coming, and I don't think it'll take as long as Tyranny would have. I'm still going to play and beat that. Just, I guess, not review it, because those recordings were shit. I don't know if I'll do the whole series for what I'm planning next, though. At least not at first. Either way, expect it. Story out.